Episode 5, Wrestling Rebooked, putting wrestling into submission. Hello and welcome. Spoiler here. We're back. And on this episode, we're going to be mixing up the format a little bit. We're going to be previewing WWE Summerslam, which is upcoming. Wrestling pre-booked, if you will. Also on this episode, we're going to have our first guest, which is rather exciting, coming in a bit. As ever, co-host, shooting from the hip, recently recovered from an aneurysm after watching a swamp match, the Spot Monkey, Andeve.
Spoiler, ready to go. Obviously, trying to be less negative, seeing as we're pre-booking rather than rebooking, but I'll see how that goes.
So SummerSlam, what might happen, what should happen, what do we think will happen? It's all here. Let's get into the card, shall we? So in no particular order, as we don't know exactly what order these matches will come yet, we're just going to preview see what we think. So why don't we open up with one of my faves, Bayley, who's going to be defending her title against Unknown at this stage via a battle royal that's going to be happening on SmackDown this week. Is she going to defend her title?
Yeah, it's some sort of it's a triple brand battle royal. So I'm assuming that people from NXT, Raw, and SmackDown are therefore taking part. So obviously, as we're recording this, we don't know who she's even going to be facing. I was thinking, who are the main contenders here? Rhea Ripley hasn't got a match yet on NXT Takeover, so I guess she might be in it. Naomi's had a bit of buzz on the internet, and in terms of her segments,
Naomi deserves better.
Yeah, that's it. Hashtag. So I wonder if she's in contention. So those two I both thought about, and then also maybe Lacey Evans. But with Bayley being a heel, with the prominence Alexa Bliss has had, I was thinking that maybe it'll be Bayley, Alexa Bliss, which will allow Bayley to retain the title, Bliss to lose, and then Bliss and Cross to have their feud and or any sort of direction Bliss goes with the Fiend and that Sister Abigail type stuff, then that sets up in that way. So I think that's going to be, if I'm guessing, which obviously I am, if I'm pre-booking, Bayley versus Alexa Bliss with Bayley retaining the title. What do you say?
I didn't think you were going to go with that, but just to backtrack slightly, I don't actually think Naomi does deserve better.
Ouch. Why not?
She's had chances. I actually think she's got a decent gimmick. Obviously, she's an incredible athlete. And I think she just lacks a certain... I don't know what it is. It's just...
Star quality.
She's just not quite there. She's just not quite there. She's mid-level. She is where she is. It's not like we're overrun with women on that roster, or at least decent talent on that card, or any card. So I don't think she's being understated in any way. To the actual match, though, I'd actually have Nikki Cross in again. Like, her and Bayley put on a decent match. Yeah, why not? She deserves it. Like, she's probably the best one on there. Like, Bliss, I think, is going to get involved with the, as you mentioned, the Strowman Wyatt match. So I can't see her featuring heavily here, at least in the match itself. And beyond that, like, who else have you got? As you mentioned, Lacey Evans, she's turning into a classic sort of flip-flop face heel with zero momentum. She's just never really got over at all. So Nikki would be my shout. And I'd have Bayley retain, obviously.
Yeah, okay. So provide an opinion. I guess we'll find out this time, or just after this time next week. Next match.
Asuka, might as well stick with the women.
Yeah.
Asuka and Banks, we know that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, who have you got winning this?
So, obviously, we think about the wider, bigger picture here, and I'd like to see Banks, Bayley build to Mania. Whether they've switched tact because I know they had a big arena booked for SummerSlam, which obviously they had to cancel because of the pandemic. Maybe that affected plans for Bayley Banks. They've put a lot of effort, creative-wise, into the storyline. So maybe just pushing that out now to Mania, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that far away, especially for what they've invested in the storyline. So you might as well keep the belt on Banks. I actually, despite what I've said on previous podcasts, I wouldn't mind a screwy ending. Asuka
Shocker.
Yeah, Asuka could be protected that way, and they could continue having some decent matches. So for me, let's keep the belt on Sasha. Let's have a decent one-on-one match from two top-end talents that we know they are. Let's have a screwy finish, maybe a Bayley interruption, and keep the belts on the golden role models.
If they're going to have a screwy finish, then that needs to be the only screwy finish of the night. I think the problem with the last pay-per-view was that every finish was so ridiculous that it just undermined everything. I think you're right. The belt stays on Banks. The golden role models have built to this peak with all the gold for the tag titles and then obviously the individual title each. So Asuka's had this, recently lost it. It wouldn't make sense to give it back to Asuka unless they're looking to pull the trigger on a Banks and Bayley split, which, given there's no crowd, given the fact that they're at the peak of their powers at the moment, I think Banks beats Asuka, and I don't really care how, to be honest. As long as Asuka takes the 1, 2, 3 or taps out, and then Bayley and Banks walking out of SummerSlam with both the titles and the tags.
I think we're agreed, right?
Yep.
They need to defend those tag titles at some point, though, aren't they?
Yeah, I guess so. Although obviously at the moment the issue is they've also got those single titles and they're building momentum with those. The matches they're having with those are good. And where we're looking in the tag division, we've got the Iconics and then the sort of semi-reformed Riot Squad. So unless they're going to defend them in an intergender match against, say, Mandy and Otis, there's not that many credible challengers. Whereas actually one-to-one on these singles titles, there's some good opportunities. Yeah, some good matches.
But in turn, you're devaluing the titles themselves, aren't you, by not having them defended? And in actual fact, they're just sort of sat there in the background.
Yeah, totally agreed. The titles are a prop, but obviously a prop that needs to be used. And you know how I feel about titles should be on cards and at the top of the cards. So yeah, I do agree. I guess they've just been so overexposed at the moment. If they were doing 2 singles matches plus the tag match, you start to think, I've had enough of them. And really they're the best thing going at the moment. So I can put up with that for now.
Apollo Crews versus MVP for the United States title.
Yeah, do you care that much about this match?
I do and I don't. As I said on a previous podcast, the challenger or the person in the match needs to be Lashley.
Yeah,
not MVP.
Or Shelton Benjamin.
Yeah. It's
the mouthpiece. It's the wrong way.
Right. Yeah, I actually think MVP is excellent.
Agree. Yeah, he's just signed a long-term contract as well because he's done so well
on this run. He's been really good. The way he speaks, the way he puts other people over, his delivery, he looks the part as well. He just like his look on his face. Some of his facials are really good. But why is he in the match? I mean, I know storyline wise why he's in the match, but it just seems ridiculous to have someone, especially Lashley, the way he's built, just stood there doing nothing,
watching, just waiting to put full Nelson on someone.
Yeah. I do think Apollo Crews is improving as well. Like some of his promo work is getting much stronger. He looks a bit more confident. So it could be a decent build once they actually get the right people in the ring. But as for this match and as for SummerSlam itself, the title needs to stay on Crews.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'd keep the title on Crews in this match versus MVP because, like you're saying, essentially just to echo it, why would you put the belt on the manager? If it was Lashley or Shelton Benjamin, I'd probably be keen to see the belt come off Crews, because the Hurt Business have much more momentum, much more focus in terms of their dominance and their prominence on Raw. But as it's MVP, I think Apollo Crews wins. I'm not sure how he's going to win this one with Lashley and Benjamin at ringside, but for me, Apollo Crews needs to win. I don't know, maybe MVP injures himself or a distraction goes wrong and Crews gets a roll up. The other alternative, which I wouldn't be adverse to, would be for Crews to keep the title and maybe join the Hurt Business.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I don't know how that would work, but maybe he wins. He's sort of towering over MVP, picks him up, shakes his hand, and says he wants to be part of the Hurt Business because he doesn't want to keep fighting them. That would be a good twist for me, given that Apollo Crews needs to win.
Yeah, I can buy that. I suppose the only thing is the Cruz is kind of on the way up, just building some momentum. Is it the right time for a heel turn? Probably not.
No, maybe not. But he would fit nicely with the strength and athleticism of the people that are already in the Hurt Business, in Lashley and in Benjamin. He's not a great talker, despite the fact his promos have improved. So you'd have MVP talking for him. So I don't think it's necessarily a natural fit, but I think it would be a positive move. So I'll just stick it out there and say Apollo Crews is going to win and then join the Hurt Business.
Rollins against Mysterio Jr.
Yeah.
For sake.
It's they're sort of in a rock and a hard place, aren't they? Because they're just in a rock. The Rock getting back. The Rock versus Rollins. That's what we want to see.
He certainly should know his role and shut his mouth. Like, he doesn't need to be in this match. He's just using up a space on a card for a massive PPV.
Are you talking about Dominic or Seth? Yeah, Dominic, of course. Yeah.
Because what is this match really giving us or telling us? I don't really see it as an extension of storyline from the Rey Mysterio stuff. How on earth are they going to get Dominic over based on this match against, or however they do it, it's just going to look a bit silly against the Monday Night Messiah that they've spent months building up. So how can this end well? Tell me.
So, no, I don't think it can. When I say they're in between a rock and a hard place, in that whatever happens, it's just going to be rubbish. I actually was thinking back to SummerSlam 10, 15 years ago, whenever it was, when Eddie Guerrero and Mysterio were fighting over Dominic, and in that storyline. Actually, Dominic was a more compelling character when he was an 8-year-old boy with dye blonde hair than he is as this sort of. I mean, he's 22, 23 years old. It's the same sort of age as Hardy and Orton when they're breaking through, but he looks like a 15-year-old, and he doesn't really carry himself in terms of promos. I mean, he hit an all right 619, but I mean, So the reason I say I'm not really interested. So in this match, the reason I say rock on a hard place is that if Seth Rollins wins, what has he accomplished? He's beaten Dominic, who I don't really care about. I don't think we as fans, audience, really care about. So if Rollins beats him, what's the point of it all? The only reason he would beat him is to have him join as one of his disciples, but we don't need that because we've got Murphy and AOP. That's no use. So then if you flip it, that's the rock. The hard place is if Dominic Mysterio wins, and then what on earth has happened? Because Mysterio's gone, Dominic Mysterio Jr.'s gone over Rollins, and that just diminishes Rollins' position and character and puts over someone that is just no one is invested in. My worry is, I think that Dominic Mysterio is going to win because at the moment, Rollins has been inflicting all this pain on the Mysterio family, taken out his dad's eye twice. And so there needs to be some payback for the faces. And this would seem to be it in Mysterio Jr.'s debut match. So despite the fact I don't really care for Mysterio, like you're saying, and I think that either outcome is a poor outcome, I think, don't get too upset, but Dominic Mysterio Jr. is winning this match. Maybe with some interference from his dad, but I think he's going to win.
It's not breaking news, is it? It probably is the way that it will go. But I mean, even if you take that all into account, other baby faces that they could have had in this match. Well, the one that springs to mind is Aleister Black.
Of course, yeah. He's off TV at the moment, but we're sort of delving into Rebooked there. But yeah, for sure.
It's just in my nature.
It should have been someone else. In the words of Dolph Ziggler, it should have been me.
Yeah. It just kind of, well, I mean, to sort of put the cherry on top as well, it's some sort of gimmick match, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, that was the Rollins promo.
Oh, yeah.
He said, bring whatever you want.
Bring a kendo stick or something.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just to segue onto that.
Kendo stick on a pole.
Yeah. Just to segue into Raw this past week. It was just a little bit off as well, the way they had him tied up in the ropes, and Rollins and Murphy were just battering him with the kendo stick.
Yeah.
And no one comes down at any point to try and help him.
And Samoa Joe's on commentary, not able to get involved either.
Yeah. Despite having, set things up. And in other scenarios, they'll have 10, 15 referees pile down for far less.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So Dominic Mysterio is going over, but we want him to get battered and just disappear.
That's probably the best we can hope for, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Street Profits against Andrade and Angel Garza.
Yeah. So
let's start with positive, shall we?
Yeah. Well, we don't know if Ford's okay. Do we? Last time we saw him, he was poisoned. We thought he was poisoned by Retribution, but actually maybe he was poisoned by Zelina Vega. So, I mean, to be fair, I'd much rather be poisoned by Zelina Vega than some 5'5" people in masks throwing breeze bricks through windows. But I mean, assuming he's going to make it, we had Dawkins win on Raw, I think. He got the pin. So if they're doing the 50-50 booking, that means Andrade and Garza are going to go over, which I looked it up earlier because I didn't know. The Street Profits have had the title since March. I thought they'd only won it in the last month or so, but they've been in such nonsense programs. Do you remember all those skits they were doing in the second? No,
I try not to remember.
Yeah, in the worst ever cinematic match with the Viking Raiders, where the ninjas turned up. Their reign just hasn't really worked. You could have either team winning in the sense that if the Profits win, you've got the Hurt Business they could feud with. If Andrade and Garza win, they've got Ricochet and Mustafa Ali or Cedric Alexander, two of those three that they could feud with. But I just think the Street Profits, despite Ford's obvious talent, hasn't really worked. And I think given the prominence of Andrade and Garza and Vega, that I'd like to see them pick up a nice, clean win to catapult them up a little bit to the next level.
Street Profits, two really talented guys. I think got a decent gimmick. Remember when they first started coming in, when they were pretty hot off NXT, they just did promos backstage and
we want the smoke
for weeks and weeks. And the way they were just slowly building their introduction to the roster was excellent. And they've come in and gathered a bit of momentum, picked up the titles, and everything that's come since then we've talked about, and obviously you've just touched on there. But it's just such a shame, that. Okay, I guess the pandemic has hurt them a little bit, but they're just absolute nonsense of cinematic matches, terrible angles, and not really having any legit opponents either. But nevertheless, I'll keep the titles on Street Profits.
Okay.
For all of the above, they just need the momentum at the minute. Taking the titles off them is just going to bury them. And Andrade and Garza are only just getting going as a tag team. There's going to be some interference likely with Selena and Bianca Belair, whose chance can't be far away.
Yeah.
She is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. They need hopefully to get
She deserves better than Naomi, does she?
Absolutely. She is legit. Decent look, decent gimmick, strong as, and need to get a title on her soon. She'll be a decent challenger, either her or Shayna Baszler. Sort of legit.
Yeah, I don't think Baszler's going to be involved in this pay-per-view, but in terms of that tag match, I definitely think Selena Vega's getting involved. You're right as well on the other side. So, but you're saying that it's going to fall down on the Street Profits rather than on the.
I hope so.
Latino
for their sake. Yeah.
Okay, two left.
Title matches.
Yep.
So, Strowman and Wyatt. Or the Fiend against the Monster.
The Monster Unleashed. Strowman Express. I sort of think if you'd have pitched this around January time as a match and said that it'd be the third match in a series between the two, it would have felt like it should have been massive. It would have felt like there would have been loads of momentum. But actually, just a bit apathetic to it, and that's probably because of their last match. Who's winning this? Strowman's reign. The title was never meant for him. I think everyone is agreed on that. His reign has been rather lukewarm because he's been fighting people like Miz and Morrison in handicap matches. He's already fought original Bray Wyatt or non-Funhouse Bray Wyatt and beaten him. He's turned up in the swamp and swam his way out, whatever. We haven't seen him since then yet. But obviously they're SmackDown tomorrow. I think they just pull the plug on Strowman and they put the title on the Fiend. And I can't see the benefit. If the Fiend loses, then what on earth's going on? And if Strowman continues, where does he go next? So while the Fiend doesn't necessarily need a title to be the excellent character that he is, considering this is where they are now at SummerSlam, I think the Fiend has to win this match. Would you agree?
100%. 100%. The Strowman run has been flat, hasn't it? Like totally flat. Maybe largely not his fault, but it's just no momentum. And you touched on a point there about him not being on SmackDown, like for whatever reason. Where's he been?
He came through the speakers last week, didn't he? He wasn't actually there. He just
there's
came through the speakers.
There's no meaningful build.
No.
Build to a match.
And they've already fought. Well, I mean, obviously it wasn't a match, but they've already had 2 matches, and now this is the 3rd. So it doesn't feel like a big feud, does it? It just feels like 3 disconnected matches with Strowman involved.
Yeah, there's no narrative. There's no rhyme or reason for them fighting, and if there is, it's been totally lost in everything that's gone on. I agree. Let's have Wyatt with the title back. He's at the top of the card for the amount of years he's put into his character.
Yeah.
So let's have him. If you're going to have him as this guy with all of this character and
it's
mystique.
roughly a year since he debuted, right? And I think that was at SummerSlam against Balor. So, you know, in terms of a bit of symmetry there, actually that works. And if that means that then once the Fiend normally beats people, it normally affects their character, or that it seems to anyway. If that means then Strowman becomes that monster that was tipping over ambulances and being thrown into dustbin trucks and all that sort of garbage trucks, that sort of stuff, and pinning 5 people or 4 people in an elimination chamber, then I think that's fine. That's what I think should happen, is that Fiend wins and then Strowman's character radically alters so that he becomes a bit of a monster among men again.
Take that.
Yeah.
Absolutely take that. Right. To the main event, or at least what we hope will be the main event.
Yeah, surely it has to be the main event, yeah.
Orton and McIntyre for the WWE title. Have you seen Raw?
Yeah, I saw Raw. I didn't enjoy Raw, of course, because it's 2020. But I think this is the hardest match to call. Would you say so?
But yes, it is. I agree.
It's a positive.
But it's a positive, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely positive.
You've got a match that can go either way. You've got 2 legit top guys, decent shape, decent characters. This is basically SummerSlam here. And if you take the women out of it for a second.
Yes.
This is what you care about. Watching, paying your $15.99 on Sky Sports to watch.
Yeah. And the way it's worked, they've done really well, because essentially they've been kept apart on 2 halves of Raw, almost McIntyre dominating, and Rollins is sort of simmering away underneath doing what he's doing. But essentially McIntyre, since he won the Rumble and then smashed up Lesnar, has been on the ascent on one side of Raw, and on the other side, since Edge has come back, you've had Orton on the ascent as well, just rebuilding his character. Edge, Big Show, Christian, and obviously on Monday, Flair. So building up that character, great on the mic. He's dipped in and out of some work with Andrade and Cena Vega. So he's been really good. On the other side, McIntyre, you might say that his challenges haven't been that great, although he has fought Rollins, but Ziggler twice as well. This is the challenge that McIntyre's been building to, and I think he's done a really good job of holding the belt, almost like he's been the Roman Reigns they wanted in Drew McIntyre. And then Orton's done a fantastic build on the other side of rebuilding his character and making himself seem deadly and dangerous and compelling viewing. So when you look at it, it almost feels like a 50-50 split. So which way are you going?
McIntyre has to keep the title.
Interesting. Why'd you say that?
Well, his run is only really just getting going, isn't it? If you take the title off and put it on Orton, okay, he takes a step closer to whatever record he may or may not break.
Yeah.
You can continue the excellent stuff he was doing with Flair on Monday, which, for the record, I thought, for a guy who's 71, he still cuts a decent promo. And McIntyre, for all his efforts through the pandemic, just to have the title taken off him, I think would be a bit of a shame. There's no reason why these two can't absolutely tear the house down in a legit match where you are invested in their every move and the back and forth of two excellent workers. And that can't carry on.
That's interesting. So I don't agree that McIntyre should keep the title. I think they should put it on Orton. The reason being that they've both been built up, and however this match ends, one of them is going to have to take a step down because one of them is going to be beaten. I hear what you're saying about McIntyre, but I also think there's probably a move in, or there's been suggested there's a move in WWE to potentially take the title off him and him to pick it back up at the Rumble or next year's Mania with fans and with the momentum to build his story again. I can see that. And I think the way they can do that is with a screwy finish, don't cry, but with a screwy finish where on Monday, obviously we all think that Orton punted Flair in the head, but we didn't actually see it because the lights were going out and we assume that's retribution. I wonder, I'm sure this is beyond the booking team, the quality of the booking team at the moment, but what would be great is if actually that had been orchestrated by Orton and Flair. Flair turns up at SummerSlam, obviously looking like he's doing a run-in for McIntyre, and of course screws over McIntyre, does a low blow on him and allows Orton to hit the RKO. Then McIntyre loses the title but doesn't lose face. That's actually a decent story as to why the lights went out. Orton and Flair get to go a bit longer, and then you can have Orton turn on Flair a bit later and McIntyre win back the title. So for me, I think the best thing they could do is rather than keep the belt on McIntyre is give it over to Orton.
It's a bit of a stretch there, isn't it?
Well,
for the booking team, not you.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, they had the lights flashing, so I thought, well, if that's the case, then maybe they've thought about, maybe they haven't thought about it at all. If they're going to take the belt off McIntyre without destroying his character and in his position and without making him drop sort of 2 levels, that would be a good way to do it. And I can see the benefit in putting it onto Orton, 14-time champion, then at the top of the card, taking out legends, all that sort of stuff. I can see the benefit of that. Whereas if they keep it on McIntyre and he beats Orton, then he's sort of out of challenges. So I would do that switcheroo and have that Ric Flair interweaved into it.
I like it. Flair already is interweaved, right? But how that manifests itself at the actual PPV would be really interesting.
The dirtiest player in the game and all that.
Right, yeah. You've certainly got a lot of moving parts there. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to watch that match. Legitimately.
Yeah, that definitely, of all the matches, actually alongside Banks and Asuka, that one really stands out as a match you're going to watch. You're not really sure who's going to win. And you're bought into both the storyline, the matches, and the characters themselves.
We've pre-booked the hottest show of the summer. Anything to add?
No, let's just see how it goes down. We've got a few different opinions there, so it'd be interesting to pick that up in a week or so's time.
If you want to continue the chat, we're on Twitter at @Rebooked or #WrestlingRebooked. There's also a link in our bio where you can listen to old episodes that we've been referencing. All right, stay tuned. Section 2 coming. Okay, Section 2, Wrestling Rebooked, Episode 5. Right. Time to welcome a special guest on the show. Wrestling superfan, the man with 8 commemorative cups from WrestleManias. The man that was aged 8 at SummerSlam 92 and remembers it all. Mr. Coops, welcome.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to ruin that great intro there. What was that noise?
It's just sound effects, positive sound effects.
Of?
Just to welcome you down the entrance ramp. That was your pyro going off.
Pyro back in the game. I love it. Okay, great.
Now we've all popped. Let's bring it back to business, shall we? So,
sorry, I get easily distracted. I warn you now.
So it's good to have you on and just kind of pick that big wrestling brain of yours for some of your historical knowledge and understanding of many years of watching WWE and related wrestling shows. So there's a few things that Andeve and I wanted to pick your brain on, especially ahead of the big SummerSlam event.
Excited to be here.
So,
that day one listener.
So with all that Scottish blood in you, what's your thoughts on that McIntyre?
I'll tell you what, I am. It's mixed emotions for me because as someone that was a ticket holder for WrestleMania this year, I was absolutely dying to get all my kilt on, my Scottish flag on. The Tartan Army were going to be living it up in Florida. It was going to be such a great moment to see the first Scottish heavyweight champion crowned. Didn't quite work out like that, but on the plus side, he has, I think, been nailing it as champion in very difficult circumstances. He's definitely represented. He's there every week, which is great for a champion, and I think he's been doing a fantastic job.
What do you think, Coops, about the fact that he's pulling off his role as a face? Because he's quite a big, strong, dominant, good-looking champion. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to always to a face champion. So what are your thoughts on how he's been pulling off being a face champion?
I actually like it as a obviously he had his run as the Scottish psychopath / Terminator / whatever the commentator felt like using that week. But I think the face turns really give him the chance to show a new wrinkle. He's got a lot of personality. I think his promos have been excellent. He brings in a little bit of humour when he needs to, but not too much. He still maintains that serious edge. But I think it's been a good showcase for his personality. I think it's been a good evolution for him.
So we were wondering, with all the Scottish influence at the top of the card at the moment, got us thinking back to days gone by, a certain Mr. Rowdy Roddy Piper. How do you think the use of McIntyre at the moment kind of links back to the way Piper was over in his heyday at various times?
He was
through the
so
90s,
good,
80s.
wasn't he? I was actually thinking back on this the other day because I was rewatching an old Piper match. He will foremost be remembered as one of the most hated heels in the history of the business. But when the face turn come, he was on fire. The crowd absolutely loved him, and mirrors McIntyre really started off heel, and then a very strong face turn. Some great reactions. Obviously, McIntyre's not got the crowd, but similar paths, I think.
Which face turn are you referring to? It was after WrestleMania 1?
Well, it was round about WrestleMania, just before WrestleMania 3, wasn't it? But then that sort of carried on into the 90s. He was sort of in and out a bit when he shot off, made a couple of films, come back. WrestleMania 5, I think he come back with his Piper's Pit. And then it was sort of face all the way from there, really, wasn't it?
He ended his career as a face, didn't he? Because he was in that triple threat handicap match against Jericho at a WrestleMania. Him, Snooker, and Steamboat fought Jericho, didn't they, in a handicap match?
Hey, that's right, yeah. Luckily for Piper and Snooker, Steamboat was in that match.
Still had a bit about him.
He was definitely doing the majority of the legwork in that one. But
don't miss leg day.
Never.
So we asked you, thinking back about Piper, we asked you to think about a few matches, potentially, obviously, with McIntyre at the top of the card for SummerSlam. We asked you to think about some times when Piper was near the top of the card on pay-per-views or big events, and you came up with 3 matches that you identified as sort of iconic or embodiment of what Piper was about. Did you want to start talking through those matches?
Well, I think if you're talking Piper, you have to, as a starting point, he was in probably one of the most significant matches probably in wrestling history. It really changed the biz. Obviously, the main event at WrestleMania 1. It was a lot. Obviously, everyone knows the backstory on how.
Do you remember WrestleMania 1? Because you were 1 at the time, weren't you? So
I was 1. I was there 13 months, I think. But no, I caught up that one on, that was in my
VHS.
Silvervision VHS collection. So I caught up on that probably a few years later. I think WrestleMania 3 was my first WrestleMania that I watched.
Okay, so WrestleMania 1. Sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
So yeah, obviously everyone knows that WrestleMania was very much make or break for Vince. He was all in, and if the event wasn't a success, obviously the company is in big trouble / potentially going out of business. So obviously it was sort of a perfect storm with the main event. It was cashing in on like the groundswell of Hulkamania was really building its momentum. They had Mr. T come in for a guest spot, and he was obviously a massive star at the time. But I think, in my opinion, just my opinion, what sometimes gets overlooked is how important a part Roddy Piper played in providing the villain of the piece, because it's quite hard to remember now if you weren't there at the time, but he was one of the most hated people on the planet at the time. He had so much heat back in the day when you could achieve genuine hatred from the crowd. And I think WrestleMania was as much about people wanting to see Piper getting mangled and embarrassed as it was people wanting to see Hogan and Mr. T. So he definitely had his part to play in making WrestleMania what it was. I think he'd always have a place in the business based on that. Even if he'd done nothing else, I think that is a very significant contribution.
In actual fact, you look at that main event, and you could say that the way Piper has drawn all his heat and got everyone over in that way is probably because of his territory days that he'd had for the previous 10 years or whatever. We'd work with everyone that there was to work with at the top of the business at that time. But in actual fact, you talk about like Vince taking a bit of a gamble. He's taking a massive gamble because in his main event, he's got Hogan. Okay, Hulkamania is what it is, but in ring, he's not going to carry you a match. You've got someone who isn't even a wrestler in Mr. T. So there had to be...
I think that's the other part that Piper doesn't get enough credit for. If you watch the match back, pretty much 100% of Mr. T's involvement is with Piper. So it was down to Piper to get everything he could out of Mr. T. And I think it was a little bit of a masterclass on making him look good, accentuating his strengths, hiding his many weaknesses. He made him look strong. He sold at the appropriate times. Didn't give him too much. It wasn't ridiculous. There was no like Superman spots where like Mr. T's punching someone through a wall like he did on the 18. To Piper, he achieved a good balance of making T look good, but not giving him too much and making it sort of a bit of a farce, a bit of unrealistic. So
should be a nod to Paul Orndorff as well, though. Right.
It's interesting you say that about Piper carrying, because I was reading today when you said about this match that actually his main job was to keep Mr. T as busy as possible. So he was taking all the fight to Mr. T. He was making sure that he was constantly involved and supporting him, and that actually led to some real life animosity. So Mr. T was obviously a big ego, and although obviously WrestleMania 2 when they had their match was obviously scripted, there was actually leading up to that some real life animosity between them, because Piper was saying, talking backstage about how he had to support Mr. T, and he was like, "Hold on, no, you didn't have to support me." And maybe that, alongside the fact that Ali's at ringside and Billy Martin's doing some guest announcing, maybe Piper's role just
the
gets
worst
diminished.
announcing job in history, by the way, just as a footnote.
There's so many of them in that ring though, because Snooker's accompanying Hogan, isn't he? And Bob Orton is involved in the match in bits as well. So I think it's probably fair what you're saying, that maybe Piper is the glue that's holding it together. But because there was so much star power in that match, and because there was so much showbiz in it, that maybe his role doesn't get the credit it deserves
for sure,
sticking
yeah,
the
for
segments
sure.
together.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Obviously, there's a lot going on there. There's about 20 people involved in the match altogether. You've got Muhammad Ali's floating around. There's a lot going on. But yeah, if you actually sit down and watch the match, I think it could have been. Obviously, it's no five-star classic, but it maybe should have been a lot worse than it was.
Any other matches of Piper's that you enjoyed?
The second one that will always spring to mind when I think of Roddy Piper, my personal favourite match that Piper was ever in. Probably a lot of people my age are going to nod their head and agree with this. WrestleMania 8 versus Bret Hart.
Right.
Now that tickles a lot of nostalgic bells for me, because I was 8 years old when that match happened, and wrestling was basically the most important thing in the world. And Bret Hart and Roddy Piper were my two absolute favourites at the time. So it was such an emotional time for me.
So what's your perspective then of if you think you have some kind of vague memory of that at that point versus watching it back now? How do you see it in two different lights, if at all?
Well, I think when you, even if you watch something back years later, you'll always be influenced by like how you felt when you first watched it. I've always thought that. So it's hard for me now, even now, to watch it objectively without remembering how it made me feel the first time I watched it. But having said that, I did actually watch it recently. And I think it holds up very, very well. It was from a time where like not every feature match had to be 25, 30 minutes. So it's probably shorter than you would expect by today's standards. Yeah.
It's 14 minutes.
But for me, that's a positive rather than a negative, because it tells the story without overdoing it. It's no like Orton Edge from WrestleMania where like 40 minutes has gone and you're still thinking, wow, there's still going. Sometimes less is more. And I think this hit all the notes. It told it. And it was also, I think probably certainly in the WWF, I would say it's Piper's best in-ring showcase. He actually showed he is capable of, obviously his character is a lot of brawling, mainly punches.
It's quite a stiff match, isn't it? If you watch it, there's a double clothesline. There's the bulldog where Hart comes up and he's probably bleeding. He's bleeding. It's quite hard hitting, stiff, sort of super strong style before people were banging on about super strong style.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But that was sort of Piper's style. But then that's always been Bret Hart as well, isn't it? He's always been a sort of hard hitting, realistic sort of style. I think the two just sort of that was the level they were always going to be on.
And what do you think about the end of the match then? Because Piper,
what an ending!
Piper puts him over quite well, doesn't he?
That is drama, because obviously going into the match, they're both the
match promo is very weird, where they talk about bologna. Piper talks about Hart's mum making him bologna sandwiches, and but then obviously that's the beginning, which I always thought the promo was a bit odd, but the end, keep going. What do you think? They built the tension. They weaved it obviously in the lead up to WrestleMania. The story is, they're friends, they've got history, but then you start to see a little bit of the rivalry coming out. There's a little bit of needle. They start the match off with, as I say, Piper's actually wrestling, which you didn't see much from him. Maybe Bret Hart starts to get the upper hand a little bit. Then Piper starts to, you start to see that he takes the cheap shot on Bret when Bret's tying his laces. Yeah. And then you start to feel, is there a heel turn coming? Then obviously it builds up to the moment where he's got the ring bell. That's right.
And he's
for an age as well. Ages.
But he was really, really milking that crowd. He was looking out to the crowd. Should I hit him? Is he going to hit him? Really built up. Then obviously decides not to. the good guy shines through. He puts the bell away, clamps in his sleeper hold, and then I think this is the first time. Obviously, Brett, he went on to use this against Austin as well. But I think this is the first time I'd ever seen this sort of turnbuckle kick finish.
Yeah. Flips over him, doesn't he? And sort of pins.
Yeah, he sort of kicks back off the turnbuckle, flips back, and pins him. And I thought it was just a brilliant way to end.
And they shake hands and go together, don't they?
That's right.
They together.
Yeah, and I think that really helped. Obviously, Brett was well established at that point as a singles, but I think that really it was a really good rub to have. I think that was the first time Piper had been pinned in the WWF. Yeah, I believe so. Certainly, definitely on pay-per-view. I think probably televised.
Well,
I don't think he'd ever taken a pinfall before that on any kind of TV. So obviously that shows the level of respect he had for Brett, and obviously anointing him as one of the top stars going forward. So
yeah, nice.
Still gives me goosebumps. That
match, 60,000 fans as well. Very nice.
Wasn't the first or last wrestler to say he had their best match with Brett.
Oh, certainly. Oh, that is an absolute laundry list. Yeah, he definitely seems to be a constant in that conversation.
Maybe one for another day.
Certainly.
Okay, so with just bringing things back to this year's SummerSlam, obviously we know that women's are going to feature quite heavily. Like it or not, maybe another discussion point, but wondered if there were any other women's matches historically pre-Four Horsewomen, as we're now referring them to, that you've enjoyed.
So we're talking pre-women's evolution, as they love to dub it.
Yeah.
All right, so my take on this is probably, maybe in certain circles, would be considered controversial. I honestly haven't always been the biggest fan of women's wrestling. I know sort of the prevailing narrative these days is that the sort of the forerunner to the women's evolution was sort of like the Trish Stratus Lita era, and obviously they were the first women to headline Raw, so that gets them a place in the history books. But to be honest, was never a huge fan of either, especially Trish. I thought just was not good in the ring. I think she always looked like what she was, someone that was hired for her looks, and then now she's here. We
got issues there. Just check with our lawyers, yeah.
I think she was obviously hired for her looks, and then now we've got her. We're paying her. We might as well stick her in the ring and see what we can get from her. So,
what about the Bellas? They were pretty good, weren't they?
Oh,
good at what they do.
I'd like to think that's not serious. He's not serious, is he?
Well, they know how to draw, don't they? They know how to draw money. Like they know how to get themselves over. They're very marketable.
Yeah, it's always guaranteed to get yourself over if you're.
It's when you're attached to the most dominant males in the roster as well, then, isn't it?
There you go. He said it. We were all thinking it.
So if you're not on Lita and Trish, which I can hear, I mean, Lita wasn't bad, but her matches are very short. Her matches are, aren't they? Like mostly it's linked to Hardy and Edge, the stuff that she's Kane,
yeah,
the stuff that she's doing.
Lita is definitely better, but I think she gets away with it a bit more because she like the eye-catching moves. Obviously, she hits the moonsaults and the Hurricane Runners and that. But if you look at her basics, it's not great.
So where are you going then? Are you going back to Mae Young as the best matches you've ever for
maybe
winning?
Fabulous Moolah.
That's pushing it a little. That predates even me and my receding hairline. But this, probably not many people would pick this. This is sort of a very underrated, I think, criminally underrated era in WWF women's wrestling. If we go back to the mid-90s, which admittedly is not a great era to go back to for anything, but we're talking, if name and ring gear aside, Alundra Blaze, I thought was well ahead of her time. She was excellent. She is what I would look for in a woman's. She looked like an athlete.
A women's wrestler or a woman just generally?
She looked like an athlete. She moved like a wrestler. She was very, very smooth in the ring. But specifically, her matches with, do you remember Bull Nakano?
If you're asking me, I mean, if it happened before 1997, I know a handful of things, and if it was women's wrestling, I definitely don't. But
I'll be honest with you. I knew the answer to that before I asked you. I just wanted you to say it. So yeah, she like
actually had a. I thought she had a decent look. Like you get watching her matches back now, like fantastic. See that coming towards the ring.
Who are we talking to? Bull Nakano?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic look. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's not hard to work out who the heel is in her match. She absolutely looked the part, and I loved her style. Like, it was a very, very Japanese style, but she just looked like she was beating people up. Very realistic offense. And
she also has a lot of. So I didn't know this match, and so I looked it up or watched a bit of it on YouTube. There's a lot of submissions going down from her in the match. She tries his two or three submission moves on Blaze. And like one's a sharpshooter and one looked like a 4-leaf clover that she then moved her up and put her across her knee. But actually they were done.
And then just slammed her face into
that's
the floor,
right.
which I thought was an excellent.
Yeah,
excellent
but they were very
touch.
well executed. And they looked very fluid. It didn't look like someone trying to practice it in the performance center. It looked good.
This is exactly exactly the point I was trying to make. See, looks like wrestling. It doesn't look like choreographed, sort of semi-slow motion, slightly clumsy, pre-rehearsed routines. It looked good, and I thought that them two specifically, their styles complemented each other very well. It was basic storytelling, but I think that's the most effective.
The match wasn't that long, but it wasn't short. It wasn't a sort of 3-4 minute match. It's close to the 10-minute mark.
Yeah, considering when it was, that's definitely longer than you would expect a women's match to get on it. And it was, I think probably the one you're talking about was from SummerSlam, right? So it's
that's right.
The second biggest pay-per-view of the year.
Yeah. And there was some good moments from both. So I was watching the Blaze drop a couple of decent drop kicks, as well as she was doing. I don't know what she was calling it, but it looks like Finn Balor's sling blade, and she did some of those. And the movements, the movements are very quick. Exactly what you're saying, really, very fluid and fluent. The match moved at a nice pace.
Very good drop kick.
Yeah, and it was hard hitting as well. It was a good call. I never watched it before, but I think that's a good call, and it does actually, as you're suggesting, what we now talking 1995. So over 20 years later, it actually does stand up. It does stand up.
Yeah, I think if you drop either of those two into the current women's roster, I think they do very well. I think they definitely hold up towards the top end of the bill.
It's a bit of a shame, is it? Because if you look at that time period in wrestling itself, just stepping away from women's and looking at it all, like, it was obviously a bit of a rough time for WWE, WF, pre-Monday Night Wars, and women just kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. And Alundra Blaze or Al Medusa will probably just always be remembered for the stunt on WCW and dropping the title in the waste bin, rather than any in-ring work.
Which is a shame. I think she regrets as well. I think she said she's on record as saying she wished she hadn't done that. Bischoff just forced her to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's a traditionalist. I'm not sure that didn't probably sit well with her. Throwing a belt in the bin is the ultimate sign of disrespect, like whether you work there or not. So that probably didn't sit well with her. And but I think she was definitely a victim of just lack of competition. I think they just ran out of people for her to work with, and obviously you can't have a one-person division. So I think if she'd have had like the current crop of wrestlers to work with, I think she would have had a very lengthy and impressive run. I think it would certainly get talked about a lot more than it does, which is a shame for her.
Business is down. You've got to cut the dead wood, right? And a lot of those women wrestlers, even if they were coming through, were probably just
that was money they probably didn't have.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been fun. It's been good.
It has been fun.
Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Oh, I can't wait. Are we doing a post SummerSlam show? Have you got that on your docket?
There's one scheduled. There's one scheduled. Your invite TBA in the post.
Never expecting to hear from you again, but I will always have this to play back to my kids and say, look, I made it.
Coops, thanks very much.
Been a pleasure.
Time for us to tap out.
WrestlingRebooked@gmail.com if you want to shoot at us. Until next time.